Hey everybody, Don Zoldi here, the CEO of P3 Tech Consulting, and I'm here with Don Bershoff, the CEO of TruWeather Solutions. We're doing an exclusive announcement today about TruWeather's weather network innovation from the ground up. So Don, welcome.
Well, thanks, Dawn, for having me. I'm really excited about talking to you about this new rollout we're having.
Well, before we get to that, let's roll out a quick video about TruWeather for everybody.
Weather. It's the one thing that can bring your flight time to a standstill. Chances are you are using countless websites and weather apps to get the weather information you need. But how do you know it's the right information? As your operations scale and schedules get tighter, the cost of downtime can quickly add up. Time equals money. Introducing TruWeather's vertical 360 view of the atmosphere, or as we call it, V360. V360 finds you those windows of flight time so you fly safely and keep on track. Safely increase flight time, battery life, and revenue generation per airframe. Here's the scoop. No other weather provider focuses on the low-level airspace like we do, and here's why. According to an FAA-funded MIT Lincoln Lab study, currently only 3% of the U.S. has good cloud height data and visibility data, and even less data for winds above the ground and cloud icing. Despite significant advancements, the current observation network lacks the data needed to effectively forecast weather in the low-level airspace. We refer to this gap as a data desert. Websites and weather apps fill the gaps of weather data by estimating what might be there. Well, TruWeather delivers capabilities to identify what is actually there. Using weather sensors and a network of networks, we begin to build an MRI of the low-level atmosphere. Whether you fly rural, suburban, or urban areas, TruWeather helps you through the entire life cycle of operations with go, no-go analytics, alerting, route optimization, and on-demand forecasting services. So, when it comes to advanced air mobility, flying passengers, or flying cargo, TruWeather Solutions will enable your business to fly safely with 30% more flight time. We are the low-altitude weather specialists, and we keep an eye on the weather for you, from the ground up.
I love that video, Don, and I love this idea of keeping an eye on the weather from the ground up, because we all know that is where the biggest data gap is. And I know you've been working so hard to fill that gap. I'm excited to talk to you about that. But before we get into all the different sensors you're employing, let's do a demo of V360 and show everybody how your product actually works in real time.
That's great. We're actually going to show you some of the sensors as we go through this workbook today. So this is our TruFlight V360, and it's important to understand that everything you see on here is available via API. And what I'm going to do today is pick an area between Berkeley and Oakland to demonstrate the power of this tool. It's a workflow for a reason. If a pilot follows this workflow, they'll be more than apt not to miss any important micro weather features that could be occurring in their flight operation area. The first thing I'm going to do is I want to show you the 1 hour weather radar nowcast. This is going to show that there's precipitation moving east of Berkeley over the last hour or two. And by doing this 1 hour predictive movement of this area, you can see that there's still some showers coming up through the Berkeley area from the south. Again, I want to emphasize that this is a forecast radar. This is not the loop of past weather information. And that's a very important distinction.
And why is that important? Yeah, Don, why is that important?
Well, because, if you're trying to time showers, if you're trying to understand if I could get some more flight time in, is this something that's going to last the rest of the afternoon? It gives you a really good idea if the next hour, if you're going to get those breaks you need to complete what you want, the operation you're conducting. Again, it's just having as much situational awareness as possible to maximize your flight ops. To the right, I want to talk a little bit about our current weather button. We have this button to give you the best estimate of the weather just south of Berkeley. Now, notice we have lots of colored dots on the chart right now, and these are general observation sites, but I'm going to shut those off. And really what happens is once you shut off those general observation sites, All you have on the right side is our best estimate of what the conditions are. And we use a blend of different data sets to do this. And the reason we do this is because you notice I just popped up some black dots on the screen. These are the METARs. Now these METARs, look how far it is away from Berkeley. And this is telling you the winds are coming out of the southeast at 15 knots. There's a ceiling. If you check that against our data on the right, you'll see it's a little different, right? We have 22 knots. Again, it's all an estimate when it comes down to it. But when you turn back on the weather observation sites now, which I've just done, these are extra data sets that usually come from agricultural stations or other state mesonets. You can start looking at the data around where our estimate is to get a better idea of what's really happening. And notice it could be totally different than what's happening down at that METAR site. So
and why is this important?
Well, because you're flying where the weather is, not where the METAR site is. You need to understand what's happening, right? And so when you fly beyond visual line of sight in the future, you're going to have much more weather awareness than you have today. Otherwise, remember, the pilot's not on the aircraft anymore. You're not experiencing the weather. And TruWeather's trying to backfill all of that lack of information with more information to try to replicate as if the pilot was, flying through that area. And that's what we're trying to accomplish. And we're doing that right now with the ground stations, right? But we also have the ability to add weather stations. And we have something called the tempest sensor that we can integrate, a low-cost weather center that we can integrate into into this workflow and have more information at the exact location you're flying at. So you could purchase this sensor today and you can deploy it outside where you operate, and it will pop up into our data feed back to you with all the other data on the same screen. And I'm going to show you in a second of how this works. I'm going to go over to Indianapolis, where we do have a client right now that has integrated their Tempest data feed into the weather station.
All right. So you're like basically crowdsourcing this data.
Exactly. And so once we start, popping these up, you can see on the bottom there, that's where the Tempest sensor is. You can see all the extra data it provides. It provides lightning strike data, precip rate, pressure, all the things you need. And what we do is, as we get more of these sensors out, we can crowdsource them together and start closing the data gaps at the surface of the Earth. But this doesn't do two things for us. It doesn't give us the ceiling and the visibility, and that's where we have one of our major gaps right now. Today the only place you can measure a ceiling or visibility is at an airport, which only covers about 3% of the Earth, right? Or 3% of the country. And so when you start flying 10 miles, 5 or 10 miles, you're going to be going in and out of these microclimates, especially in San Francisco. If you've ever been to San Francisco, you can go a half a mile and be in fog and go another half a mile and be out of fog. How is a beyond visual line sight pilot going to know they're going in and out of fog, right? You won't know. And so what we're looking at is backfilling another type of sensor out there called the IntelSense sensor. And what this sensor does is that you can deploy this sensor and you can have it along your route of flight. It's tactical and you can move it, and that will give you ceiling height and visibility at that location. And that sensor is approximately 7 times cheaper than what you get at the airport today. And this is an example of that sensor. This sensor has been deployed in Bagram, in Kandahar, on military airfields, in theater. So it's a very good sensor. And what that does is, once you turn that on, it shows up again in our workbook to you with all the other data. Yeah, so I'm going to go now to X Elevate, where one of our partners out there, the test range in Virginia, where we do have a sample sensor that's running right now at that test range to demonstrate the simplicity of how this works. So if you want to work with another weather company and do this, they're going to charge you thousands and thousands of dollars just for integration. And there's a good chance it's not going to be integrated into an API workflow like we have that gives you a one-stop shop for all your information. So That's where, that's what this is really about. We want to make it a simple workflow. We don't want you to have to look at 3 screens with your sensor in one screen and then looking at 4 or 5 weather apps in another screen. So here's an example of the IntelliSense sensor. It's displaying the winds, the temperature, the height of the clouds. And what I recommend to folks is when you're thinking about getting your waivers and your waiver packages for beyond visual line of sight, you purchase 1 or 2 of these sensors and you could deploy them along the route of sight, and you could go back to the FAA and say, we actually are measuring the ceiling and the visibility along that route in order to give them, satisfaction that you're going to be able to maintain that 500-foot clearance from the clouds that is required, due to FAA regulation.
So Don, when people purchase one of these sensors from you or from the company directly, and they become part of your network, does that information then go to everybody, or can it?
It can. It depends on the relationship we have with the owner and if they're willing to share the data. What I wanted to show you, though, when you don't have a sensor, we still have this cloud depiction here that shows you the best estimate of the clouds. So in this case here, you see over the bay, there's a ceiling is between 1,000 and 3,000 feet right on the bay. And then when you get inland, you see the cloud deck goes up. So this is one of the tools that we provide. So if you're flying BVLOS and you don't have a sensor, this at least gives you an idea of what those ceilings are doing. But again, it's not perfect. It's an analysis. There's gaps in it. And, we do the best we can. So what we do is we backfill that with these road weather sensors that we bring in also as another tool. And here you could see, so you could see in that area where we're in the blue and purple, you can see it has been raining. You see the road spray, the ceilings look a little bit lower. So this can kind of use this as a validation also of what is happening out there. Here's another sensor that shows the scud, the lower cloud scud that's starting to, the sun's trying to break through. And again, these sensors will be just another tool to fill these gaps, to give you that situational awareness. We're working with Iris Automation, who has their CASA G network, and we're hoping to get a lot of these sensors where they're imaging pictures that we could get their images in, and also add this to this whole event. So again, you see this area where there's some red, which is the visibility. I just pulled up a visibility chart. It's saying the visibility is between 1 and 3 miles, and I just showed you the video that's showing, it looks like the visibility is low in that area. So this is just the power of, from the ground up, bringing all these data sets together in a one-stop shop and allowing you to see, again, looking at different observations, comparing against what you're seeing, comparing to what our models are saying. This is what a pilot should really be doing in their workflow when they provide, fly beyond visual line of sight. And TruWeather will provide training on how to use this, and we will also work with companies and UAS programs out there to help on the tactics, techniques, and procedures to make sure you are getting the full value of this data to help optimize your operations. So
that's incredible.
Yeah, so what we're going to do now is I want to talk a little bit about, the winds, right? So we haven't really talked about the winds above ground level. The winds above ground level are the biggest mystery. At least you could see clouds, right? But the challenge we have is we only measure winds at 122 balloon launch sites a day, twice a day, and around airports where aircraft land and they will enter, below 400 feet right around the airport. Again, 97% of the country does not have any measurements of winds aloft. This right here is our best estimate of those winds based on a model, right? And right here we see the winds are blowing 14 to 25 knots. You can see at the ground on the right, we're seeing gusts to 22, 27. And so those winds aloft may not be accurate. We could be 10 knots stronger aloft right now. And we see that a lot when we launch our drone, a Meteor drone, and these microclimates around water and terrain really can change those winds. So what we're doing is, we're working on providing sensors now that can actually measure the winds aloft. One of these is our Metro Weather scanning and wind LiDAR, which is part of our urban test bed in NASA down in Hampton, Virginia. We'll have 2 of these out there operating that can look up and look for dust and particles in the air. And using Doppler technology, we can track the movement of those particles and how the winds are behaving aloft. And this could cover a 20-kilometer area up to 6,000 feet at 75-meter resolution, which means you got virtually an MRI of the atmosphere. You know, it's like you could see the winds and the currents. This is going to be amazing for power optimization, power consumption, how far you can fly. You know, are you going to get there on time? If you got a strong headwind, are you going to be able to deliver your goods to meet the contract that you have with your clients? And we're looking at these as being amortized across lots of drone missions. So we're going to drive the cost down. We're going to deploy these, resell this information, and drive the cost down per operator to make it very affordable for them. And it's going to get them about 10-to-1 return on investment. Another product we have for wind is our NRG LiDAR. And this is what we use for a point location. So if we don't want to have a scanning LiDAR, because they're a little more expensive, you can actually have a single beam LiDAR at a point that could go up and see those winds up to 800 feet above the ground level. Again, these will help us measure and give you a better idea if there's wind shear aloft, what's happening aloft. This is an example of this instrument. It's easily deployable. We've talked to folks about putting them on mobile command posts that go out to the field after disaster recovery operations.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, you're trying to get drones up, right? And you want to know what's the soonest I can get them up, because if you're waiting and you don't know what those winds are doing, you're losing time to go find people that are trapped in rubble and to identify the damage assessments. We also have the Trisonica at a moment, which we can put on top of towers. And this one here, if you can go with the LiDAR, or it could go on its own. You can also put this on top of a drone. And we're going to be flying that anemometer on drones in the UAS test bed down in Hampton. We're bringing all these sensor capabilities together, and we have basically a playground for sensors down there. And we're going to be working with NASA, who's going to be flying their high-density vertiport operations. And we're also working with Longbow, who has a system called Pegasus, which is an airspace navigation system. And we're going to be tying all this data together into these systems, and we're going to be demonstrating the full value of micro weather fully integrated into specific corridor operations that's going to get you maximum efficiency and effectiveness. Now, when we look at this, one of the things I want to talk about is that you still have to use some FAA products. FAA requires you still to use a certain set of products when you're flying. And one of these I'm going to talk about now are our AirMets and our SIGMETs.
What are those? I love acronyms.
So AirMets are advisories for meteorological weather advisories aloft. SIGMETs are significant weather advisories aloft. And usually a SIGMET would be something like icing, which you shouldn't fly in, right? An AirMet would be more of an advisory. In this case, we pulled up the AirMet that comes from the National Weather Service, their Aviation Weather Center, and it's telling you that you have mountain obscuration. In other words, there's clouds probably at the mountaintops. They're obscuring the mountains. And if you're flying beyond visual line of sight, and you're going up in terrain, then you might run into IFR conditions, even though where you are and where you're flying from could be perfectly legal to fly in.
That sounds dangerous.
Yeah, well, it's I hate to say it, but it's what happened to Kobe Bryant, right? And that happened with a helicopter pilot on board flying. So imagine when you're flying BV loss, how are you going to know what those clouds are doing out there? This is why we got to get this higher resolution capability, because we want them to fly, right? We want to get the data. We want to be safe. 30%, 30% of all manned aviation today that's canceled or delayed due to weather could have flown, right? They don't fly because of the uncertainty. We want to get more certainty so you can get more flight time. I mean, that's really what TruWeather is all about. So, going on, when you have very difficult weather conditions and you're trying to make a decision and the automated weather is just not working, either conditions are changing rapidly, it's uncertain, the forecast is uncertain, sometimes you just got to talk to a meteorologist, especially when it's a high event for you, a high cost event. So we have something called Meteorologist as a Service. And we could be looking at these workbooks with you or looking at your products with you and talking to you about the uncertainty, about what we're seeing, and give you advice on a go, no-go decision. Okay, that's really critical. We also have our mission. We have our MissionCast product, which I just showed you, which I consider the flagship product, right? This is updates every hour. It's a stoplight chart, and it's focused on what the pilot cares about for BV loss. It takes a variety of different data sets from different models. So what TruWeather's doing is we're blending weather data from different models that have strengths. So our ceiling height comes from one model. Our winds come from another. And the reason we do that is because no one model handles all of these well. Most of our competitors are just giving you one generic model. They're using it for everything, renewable energy farms, public forecasting. And so we're focused on your problem, and we blend this together, and then we bring in our data sets in with that to give you that full picture. We also have our Meteo drone, which is going to be flying up in North Dakota this fall. This is another product that allows us to go up and fly and detect icing in clouds. So one of the biggest challenges we're going to have with advanced air mobility is that we're going to have icing in clouds. And today, the only way you can detect it is by flying in it. And what's happening is we're seeing a lot of drone operators flying national security missions that are being grounded due to our icing forecast. And I know from my experience, because I have 300 hours as an aircrew meteorologist, that there's a lot of times when that icing forecast isn't correct. It may not be icing. So we're going to use that Meteo drone to fly up into the clouds up to 17,000 feet. We're going to be able to see if the icing's there. And if it's not there, we're going to rerun the forecast and we're going to get the airspace flying. And that's really what we're about at TruWeather. That Meteo drone is also going to help us improve our forecast models. We're going to get better cloud and ceiling and visibility onset forecasts and dissipation. We're going to get ahead of the problem. We're going to see the winds. We're going to be able to rerun the models to get better wind data. And that's going to be coming out over North Dakota this fall. And I think, you're going to want to talk a little bit about that, Dawn.
Yeah, so I am. I'm really excited. I love Grand Sky, and you use the word playground, and I love that, Dawn. There's no better playground for icing in the air than Grand Forks, North Dakota, or North Dakota in general. And, in the Air Force, as you know, Dawn, they used to say, why not, my not, freezing's the reason. And, the same concept applies, right, to Grand Forks. So hopefully when you and I are there, it won't be snowing on us in October, but I'm excited to see the Meteo drone again in person. We saw it at AVSI Exponential, but to see it launch and to be there for that live, I'm super excited, Don. I'm glad to be a part of it.
Well, I don't think people would know this, and I think Grand Forks will like me saying this, but you can get more flight time, I think, up in Grand Forks than you can in Florida, because of the fact that, in Grand Forks, you have a couple of seasons that, get a little messy. But for the most part, the winters are pretty dry. It's not too windy. The summers are really good to fly. But in Florida, you have pop-up thunderstorms that really cause a little havoc. So, people be surprised, right? You'd be surprised don't be fooled by what you think in your perception of some place. Now Florida, we're working on that, right? We're working on getting better weather data. And we're going to be doing some other research projects with Embry-Riddle. And we're going to try to get our hands around detecting the onset of thunderstorms and showers before they occur to help some of these advanced air mobility operations in Florida. We need better predictability for thunderstorm pop-up. And
you need it for everything in Florida, Don, because I lived there and lacrosse was routinely canceled because of lightning and thunderstorms. So like everything that happens in Florida, like when it rains, things stop. So absolutely.
Yep. So we're going to tackle the toughest problems, right? We're tackling the ceiling and visibility problem, the turbulence problem, the icing problem, and we're going to tackle the thunderstorm initiation problem. And that's what the science could do if you have the measurements and the instruments and you have the data and you can integrate it and turn it into insights. And that's what TruWeather, that's what we're doing.
Well, it's incredible. And, I'm excited to see this continue to grow over time. And what you already have now with this MissionCast and V360 is such a value add to people, Don, because no one else is, as you said, pulling in and integrating the data that's already out there, a data set that you continue to grow on a daily basis by crowdsourcing and enlisting other folks. I love that you combine ground sensors with iris automation and others. Just phenomenal. So thank you for everything you're doing.
Well, thank you for being a fan. And don't forget, we're also working on the ASTM F38 standards, right? And working very closely. I lead that group, and we're going to basically, the FAA has said that they want to move forward with the concept of getting away from certifying weather instruments to data performance standard, which means because of that, we'll be able to use other types of weather data now. We don't have to just use the ASOS, $250,000 ASOS. We will actually be able to use lower cost sensors like the Tempest, as long as we know the quality of the data coming off of it, and we can quantify that with the error rates and then make that available with the metadata to the UTM and to the end users. This is really exciting because that's going to allow us to close these gaps a lot faster, a lot more affordably. And to me, that's one of the biggest wins. And I really take my hat off to the FAA and to NASA, because NASA is really, driving this innovation. Without the NASA support, TruWeather wouldn't have developed some of these capabilities that we have. And I really take my hat off to them for really being out in front and really wanting to help small businesses while also solving a major problem that's going to come down the pike.
Well, that's awesome. And everybody, you heard it here first. It's TruWeather's Weather Network innovation from the ground up. And Don, if they want to get in touch with you, how do they do that?
Well, you can see here on the screen, obviously we have our contact information here, but people can always contact me directly at don.birchoff@trueweathersolutions.com. And I want to give one more call out. So we're going to be rolling out the North Dakota Micro Weather Service this fall. And I want to give Tom Sawyer a lot of credit for having the vision and the understanding of how important this service is going to be for what he's trying to do with expanding his aviation park and working with those like General Atomics, who are bringing a significant mission back to Grand Forks with drones. And I'm just excited to be working with Tom because, he's just a great supporter. And my goal now is to make him really successful at making sure we optimize the use of those drones for what they're supposed to do. And I can't talk about that here, but let's just say it's cool.
It's going to be cool, no doubt in my mind. So you heard it here. Thank you, Tom Sawyer. Thank you, Grand Sky. Looking forward to seeing Meteor Drone in North Dakota here soon, and to continuing to watch the Weather Network innovation from the ground up as it continues to expand. So that's all she wrote. We are out here. Thank you so much, Don.
Thank you.